tonight's meeting. It's a special workshop meeting for the school board called School Board Construction Workshop. We're not being televised tonight, but we will be recorded. And to begin our workshop this evening, I'd like to ask Assistant Superintendent Scotty Crowe if he'd come forward and lead us in the pledge.
Thank you. Good evening. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
We have one board member. Board member Dee Dee Rasmussen is in traffic on her way, so she'll be here shortly joining us. But the meeting tonight is a special workshop session, and over the years school boards have come together in this type of format to have staff, superintendent staff, present to us issues related to current policies and practices. And that's the format we're going to use tonight. As I stated, it's been publicly noticed, but we'll be taking no action tonight. Now, as we know, over the past few weeks, many questions have been raised about an investigation undertaken regarding practices, procedures for awarding contracts. Tonight's workshop will provide the superintendent staff the opportunity to describe our way of work. I stress that our way of work for a construction project, from sort of the conception of a project to what happens along the way until it finally comes to the board for board action, and then a chance for the board members to really share with what action do we take once it's on our agenda in the review process. We need to respect the fact that internal and external investigations are being conducted on specific projects, activities, and procedures related to past contracts. Tonight, our comments and questions should be confined to the material being presented and not comment on current investigations. We need to respect the due process requirements as set forth in statutes and board policy, and as chair, I'll be monitoring that tonight. So tonight, we have a lot of our staff with us. It's part of our family. We've worked together for so many years, and this is a session which is we come together in most of our workshop. It should not be a stressful session. Tonight we're here to really talk about those practices, those procedures for our construction process. The agenda that we will follow tonight, I think the board members and public may have a copy of that. It's very short and brief. We're going to move right into the construction presentation, and then we'll have question or input or comments from the board members on the material presented tonight. And then we will have an opportunity for any of those speakers or those in the audience that would like to come up and make a comment. We have a 3-minute rule that will apply to that, so we welcome public comment tonight. And then our Superintendent Pons will make some closing remarks. So I think Dr. Barbara Wills, Assistant Superintendent, is going to take the lead, and we'll begin tonight's workshop.
Good afternoon, board members. Good afternoon. As our board chair stated, the purpose of this workshop is really to look at what our procedures are, how we identify construction projects, how those projects are funded, our way of work in selecting and assigning those projects, the implementation of those projects, and then completion. And I wanted to talk a little bit at the end about some of the Auditor General findings and what we've done since those findings, so you could get a glimpse of some of the changes and improvements that we've made in construction and facilities. We have a lot of people here from the Division of Construction and Facilities, so I just wanted to take a minute to introduce our team to you. It takes a lot to get the amount of projects done that come out of our department. It takes a lot of team members, a lot of work, and so I wanted to just introduce everybody to you if I could. If you guys could stand up for just a minute from Construction and Facilities. We have with us everybody from our department, our permitting department, our office staff, our project coordinators, our accounting staff, which it takes, like I said, it takes a lot to get this done. Our bookkeepers have over 35 years of experience in construction accounting. The detail and the level of scrutiny that goes into what we do requires a very professional staff, and thankfully at Leon County Schools we have that. And before we go any further, I just want to take a minute to kind of talk a little bit about where we're at with everything. In the last few weeks, we've been under a lot of scrutiny in our activities and what we do, and nobody knows that better than our superintendent and board members. Prior to that, however, we've been looking at our way of work and ways to improve. There's a lot of catalysts for change that have weighed on us in the last year or two. Of course, the Auditor General's report that all of you have seen, we've looked at that several times. We've looked at ways to improve. We've looked at our contracts. They were due to be updated. So that's caused us to look at other school districts, what their practices and way of work is, to look at other government entities, Florida State, Florida A&M, how they assign contracts, what they do. So we've really been working on this for a while. We have a consultant that we brought in about a year and a half ago who's helped walk us through a lot of this process. So a lot of what you see tonight, though the timing of this is certainly, generated by the events, we've been doing this for a year and a half. We've really been working on these changes. As part of your packet, you have a list of policies and procedures that are construction related that we've updated. You'll see on that list that a lot of those were updated in 2013 and late 2012. So this is something that we see as ongoing in an attempt to always be better at what we do. And I think that's a district-wide philosophy that we have in all of our departments, not just construction and facilities. So I'm proud to stand here before you and tell you the changes that we've made and just introduce you a little bit to our way of work. Having said that, though, I'm going to try not to be too detail-oriented on this and not to give you too much, because it's a lot. When you're looking at the contracts that we do, the awards that we do, the amount of work that comes out of Construction and Facilities Department, it's a lot. So I hope when you leave tonight, you'll walk away with a reminder of what and how we do our work, and better informed about why we made some of the decisions we made and the process and how that occurs. I've got 3 people tonight that are going to help with this presentation. Everybody from Construction and Facilities worked on this presentation and provided input and helped us build and create the presentation you'll see in the information packet, but especially Danny Albritton, our Director of Construction and Facilities, Rod McQueen, one of our project coordinators, and Martha Chauncey, who's our coordinator for facilities planning. So I'm going to ask Martha if she'd like to come up and speak. I didn't click along in my presentation, did I? There we go. This is kind of what we're going to go through tonight. We'll talk a little bit about how we select projects, what that process looks like, how they're funded, the architect and an engineer and their role in it, the actual project implementation, and Rod's going to speak to that while the construction's ongoing and when we get to final completion, and then we'll talk about what it looks like from that point on. So Martha's going to come up and get us started. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I am going to be discussing our capital outlay process, the 5-year work plan, and the 5-year educational plant survey, as well as the CIRT, which is Capital Improvements Review Team. First, we'll start with the question, what is capital outlay? Capital outlay is referred to as either operating capital outlay or fixed capital outlay. The differences in those is operating capital outlay means equipment, fixtures, and other tangible personal property of a non-consumable and non-expendable nature, the value or cost of which is $100 or more, and the normal expected life, which is 1 year or more. Operating capital outlay items are normally included as part of a new facility. Fixed capital outlay means real property, land, buildings, including fixtures and fixed equipment, structures, etc., including additions, replacements, major repairs, and renovations to real property, which materially extend its useful life or materially improve or change its functional use, and including operating capital outlay necessary to furnish and operate new or improved facility. With the capital outlay process, we have a committee that is made up of staff and community members. The membership list and the meeting minutes are going to be included on our website that is currently under construction. We are planning to show more information on this website so that we can be more transparent about our processes. Barbara, do you want to show that? This is our current website, and there's different selections probably under facilities. Yeah, there it is, capital outlay. So there you have the minutes of all the meetings and the list of committee members that if anyone would like to, it's under construction right now, but we're hoping to have it up and running soon for everyone to look at. The committee meets for several weeks in the spring to develop a budget based on capital outlay goals and budgeting priorities as listed in Board Policy 7100. During these meetings, the committee will hear presentations from each department director explaining their list of needs. I usually go out and meet the principals to see what they feel is needed at their site and relay this information to the committee. The committee creates and approves a balanced budget to be submitted as a recommendation to the superintendent and the board. A board agenda item is submitted in May to request permission to advertise a public hearing on the proposed budget. This will come before the board next week, actually. The public hearing is held on the capital outlay budget, and the proposed budget is submitted to the school board for approval at the board meeting in June. For this current budget year we're looking at, or this next budget year, is currently scheduled to come before the board June 24th for approval. Next, I'll talk about the work plan. Each school board is required annually to adopt a district school budget. The budget must contain an educational facilities plan, which includes long-range planning for facilities needs over a 5-year, 10-year, and 20-year period. School boards must develop the plan in coordination with local governments, and it must be consistent with the local government's comprehensive plans. The school board's plan must meet the needs of all growing communities in the district to provide new schools ranging from small rural communities to large urban cities. Next, I'll discuss the work plan process. Actually, the timeline of when we do it. DOE activates the online work plan software for us to start editing in July, early July. We request board approval of this document in September, and it's due to DOE by October 1st. Now for the school plant survey, or also called the educational plant survey. It is a systematic study of present educational and ancillary plants and the determination of future needs. This is how we come up with our projects to do. The purpose of an educational plant survey is to aid in formulating plans for the housing of educational activities of students and staff of the school district for the next several years. And the survey must consider the local comprehensive plan in its forecast strategies. The development of this plan must be based on a careful study of all available data regarding current status of educational and ancillary facilities in relation to capital outlay, full-time equivalency, student membership, also known as COFTE, C-O-F-T-E, and the projected changes in COFTE student membership. There are several steps we go through in creating this school plant survey. One step is to compare the school space inventory, also known as our FISH report, with a facilities list to make sure that they have the spaces needed for the projected students of that school. The facilities list identifies the standard school programs by grouping and listing the classrooms and support spaces that districts normally consider the most ideal for meeting the district's needs. The next step is to meet with project coordinators and maintenance staff to see what renovation and remodel needs they have discovered. After that, we meet with principals and directors to discuss items that they feel need to be addressed at their school or site. This process is also done with administrative offices. If we have more student stations than projected COFTE available for elementary, middle, or high within the district, we are not allowed to build additional student stations using 1.5 mills. The next thing I'll discuss is the half-penny and CERT committee. We have projects that are not survey recommended but have been recommended by the CERT, which is the Capital Improvements Review Team. These projects can only be funded with half-penny revenue. CERT was established by the Greater Tallahassee Chamber of Commerce. Their team of 59 members in business, education, and community leaders spent more than 2,000 hours of volunteer time studying the facility and equipment needs of our schools. They also conducted 50 on-site visits. Upon completion of the review, they submitted a list of findings and recommendations to the district, and we use those in planning our projects. And now Rod McQueen will continue.
Actually, I think Danny's.
Or Danny's next.
While he's coming up, I want to let's hold our questions till we hear all of this. Is that the pleasure of the board? Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. All right, I was going to discuss the pre-qualification process for all contractors. To be a contractor for Leon County School Board, they have to be pre-qualified. There's an annual qualification, and what they do in the criteria, they have to have proof that they hold a valid contractor's license. They have to have evidence that their surety company has bonded them at an A or better, and they have to have evidence of 5 years of K-12 construction experience to be a contractor for Leon County School Board. The selection process for architects and engineers. When we do the selection process, the first thing we do is after the plant survey, the funding, all the sources are available and approval by the board of the project list, we establish a committee. We then turn around and advertise for submittals. Interested parties make submittals. The committee then reviews their submittals and shortlist a minimum of 3 projects or 3 firms. Once the committee has ranked these firms, they're contacted and asked to do a presentation. The committee then, at the presentation, ranks them on a criteria of the ability of their professional personnel, that their certified minority business enterprise participation, past performances, willingness to meet time and budget requirements, location, recent, current, and projected workloads of the firm, and volume of work previously awarded, trying to do equitable distribution of contracts. The committee makes a recommendation that is brought to the board for negotiations. This allows us to, after the board has approved it, allows us to negotiate with the architect for a proposal to do the contract. If the negotiation is successful, we bring the proposal to the board for approval and move forward. If it's unsuccessful, we go to the second most highly qualified firm, and so on until we go through it. The selection process for a construction manager. We establish a committee, we publicly advertise for submittals. The construction managers make submittals. Of these submittals, the committee reviews all the submittals and comes up with 3 firms that are the most highly qualified. These 3 firms are then contacted to do a presentation for the committee. The committee uses the same criteria as the architects, the ability of professional personnel, certified minority business, past performances, willingness to meet timelines, budgets, location, recent current workloads, and volume of work, please. They use those 7 criteria to establish their highest ranked CM. They make a recommendation to the board. The board approves the recommendation to negotiate with them, at which time the CM, if the negotiation has been approved, the CM bids the project and brings a guaranteed maximum price to the board for approval within budget and within the timelines. Architects and engineers for minor projects. These are projects under $2 million that have a continuing contract. Under Florida Statute 287-055, we can have continuing contracts for a fixed period of time. Under this, we establish a committee. The committee ranks the committee ranks the pre-qualified contractors that are on the continuing contract list by the same ability. Also, they make the recommendation based on the scope of the project. So each one is, we negotiate based on the most highly qualified firm for that architect. And if a successful negotiation within the budget, the proposal is then brought to the board for recommendation to the board and approval. that we can move forward with the contract, with the architect. For minor projects, for CMs under $2 million, and Florida Statute 255.103, the continuing contract is allowed there also for projects less than $2 million for an established period of time. We establish a committee. The committee is ranked, the committee ranks the firms that are on the continuing contract based on the same criteria in 287, plus we rank them by the scope of the project. The committee negotiates and establishes a GMP. The GMP is then brought to the board for approval and acceptance. Design process, okay, that's Rod's picks up. What we have done is in the past, let me go to my note here, in the past projects assigned under the continuing contracts were selected by various teams based on the architect and construction, based on the architect and the construction management's abilities and past performances. The Auditor General's report criticized Leon County Schools for not following the procurement process found in 287 and recommended procedural changes. Since then, projects have been selected under, but the continuing contracts, we have established a team at the facilities and construction based on the project coordinators. The team is established with them. These are the people that are working daily with them. They rank the firms that are on the continuing contract based on the procedures found in 287, the scope, their strengths, their weaknesses, and then those are brought to the board for approval for architects, engineers, and for the construction managements. Okay. And then Rod.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Under the project management phase of construction, we bring in the architect team and they perform what they call a programming effort. In this effort, they validate or they verify that the program and the specific project scope and the budget from the 5-year plan is adequate for the project. Once the program is approved, then they submit multiple phases of documents, phase 1s, phase 2s, and phase 3s, which are all reviewed and approved by Leon County School Board staff, including permitting, maintenance, safety and security, administration, transportation, and food service as required. Also, the fire department and the Department of Education is included in the review process. We also have the architect provide us with cost estimates at each submittal to ensure that the project stays within the budget. Simultaneously with the architect being on board, we hire a construction manager for pre-construction phase. As a checks and balance effort, we have them to validate the program to ensure that the project meets and stays within the budget, conduct constructability reviews to ensure that the project can be built in per the design. They too provide cost estimates for each phase and develop a schedule for the project to ensure it can be done within the time we've set. We have them also provide value engineering suggestions if needed to ensure that the project stays in budget. Danny kind of touched on this a little bit. Once the board approves the phase 3 documents to go to DOE, the construction manager then advertises in a public newspaper for 30 days the project, and then it's openly bid with the construction team present. While the documents are being viewed by DOE, they issue us an approval, and also our building official issues us a building permit at that phase. Sorry. Move one back. Got it? One more. Right, one more. Oops. One more, okay. Sorry about that. Once the GMP is approved and a contract is issued and signed by the board, then the construction then commences and a notice to proceed is issued by our contract administrator. The construction project coordinators conduct daily site visits, and inspections are required or done by our permitting office and architects to ensure the project is built as per code and per the design intentions. The project team meets bi-weekly or monthly, depending on the schedule of the project, with the architect and the construction manager to discuss the schedule, construction issues, the monthly payment application, and any previous minutes or issues from prior meetings. Once the project is deemed complete or substantially complete, we conduct a life safety inspection, which is done by our permitting office along with the architect and engineer to ensure that the project is built and safe for our students to occupy. They develop a punch list, and we give the construction manager, 30 days to address and complete these punch list items. Once those items have been completed, we conduct a final completion inspection, which is also done by the same team of individuals. Once the punch list items have been addressed, a certificate of occupancy is issued, and we obtain approval letters from site administrator, which is the principal, our contract administrator, Department of Maintenance. We get a copy of all the required warranties and closeout documents, and we submit documents as required to the Department of Education for approval. Once that process is done, then we request a release of retainage from the board. And once that has been issued, then we submit the final payment to the construction manager. Then we enter into the warranty period. The warranty period is typically a month, but within 11 months, we go back out, the entire construction team, and walk the project to ensure that all warranty items have been addressed and completed. What we're moving forward with now, we're going to implement a construction project management software, which will help us with monitoring project expenditures, schedule, use of resources, improve our transparency and communication, and share information between the multiple users. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So very quickly, we went through the entire process of how we select, assign, and implement a project. Just some highlights I want to make sure that everyone's aware of. From the beginning, this process involves a lot of people, and we've tried to allow for public input in as many places as possible to make it as transparent as possible, and I hope that you've seen steps where we've improved that, and in the future you'll see more about how we're going to make what we're doing more transparent and make more information available. From the beginning, when we plan these projects, there's the CERT committee that's involved with citizens on that group. There's the Capital Outlay Committee, which has a district advisory council representative on it, a school board member representative on it, administrators and others. Those meetings are all publicly noticed. They're all open to the public should anyone want to attend. Also during that planning process, we're sure to involve principals, site administrators, and others who work at the school site, and no one knows best about the needs of their site, of course, than the principals and the people that are there. Our project coordinators know their schools well. They're there every day, so they work with us on what that list looks like and what needs to be done. Our maintenance department and others all have a role of some of the items that we need to consider. When we look at our funding sources, we can never fund everything that needs to be done, so that's the purpose of the capital outlay process, to try to prioritize those and determine what needs to be done. Every year, we bring you a balanced budget. Our recommendation to the superintendent and to the school board members. The capital outlay committee puts together that budget and makes a recommendation to you. We're coming to you next week, as Martha said, for a request to advertise, and it'll come to you for final vote in June. So again, there's room for public input and comment on the work that we do and what we bring you. The selection and assignment of projects, as Danny explained, there is a lot of detail to what's statutorily required and a lot of guidelines that we follow. One of the criticisms that we had two findings in the Auditor General's report. One was that we didn't have a process. If we were to take a project and break it into phases, we didn't have a defined process and policy and procedure as to how we would do that. The other criticism was that we didn't evaluate what our processes were. So if we were looking at a project and trying to decide whether to do construction manager at risk or to do a selection process, we didn't have it. The Auditor General's report, and I put a copy in your packet of the two findings related to construction and facilities. The Auditor General's report, which came out in March of 2012, the final version, finds that Leon County Schools didn't have a policy and procedure for evaluating that. It stated that we did a lot of projects up to that point, design, bid, build, but we didn't really have a process for evaluating what was most cost-effective for the district. So that's something that we're currently working on. The statute, of course, does allow for construction manager at risk. It allows for going through the selection process. There's a variety of methodologies available to you. So we're working at how we can better evaluate those methodologies and determine what works best in what instances. So we're trying to put something together for that now, and that's going to be, again, a long-term process. All these improvements that we've made and that we'll continue to work on take a long time to make sure that we gather all the information we can. For example, when we were looking at construction manager at risk and collecting information from other school districts, we found that of the 67 districts, about 52 use construction manager at risk. So when you look at information like that, you know there must be a reason that that's an effective way to do projects. So that's information that we'll continue to gather, that we'll continue to evaluate and consider. Another recommendation that was included in that second finding related to facilities management was our long-term planning. So when Martha spoke, she talked about that 5-year plan, that 10-year plan, that 20-year plan, and what we do with it. When we have looked at our half-penny revenue, we have 3 major funding sources. The half-penny sales tax, of course, that we renewed in November of 2012, that generates about $22 million annually. We have the 1.5 mills that was also talked about. That generates almost 20 million, not quite 20 million a year. And then the PICO dollars, which really we haven't in the last 3 years received any PICO dollars. That's just been so minimized, and the legislature's made different funding decisions with that. So our budget every year is completely half-penny and then 1.5 mills. That's what comes to our capital outlay committee, and that's what's budgeted to these projects. So one of the recommendations from that Auditor General report was to look at our long-term facilities planning. So that's something we're working on. We've got the structure in place with the Capital Outlay Committee and the CERT Committee. We've got the administrator input and the project coordinators working on this. We've got the direction of our Director of Facility, Director of Construction. So what we're looking at is just how to bring all this together to really develop a stronger plan and moving forward so that we can avoid any mistakes of breaking out projects in phases. One of the reasons that we looked at these projects and needed to do it in phases was because of timelines and the concern of getting students into these new classroom wings. So that's something that we're very concerned with, making sure that we take a longer view, that we're able to stand back and look long-term at what needs to be done when, and put the whole picture together. As you can see, there's a lot of components, a lot of pieces and parts that go into making this work. So that's something that we're really trying to work on with our committee process and the transparency. Even where our board members are concerned, there are a lot of opportunities when we have public hearings and advertisement and items come to you that, for your vote and consideration. We want to make sure that we're giving you all the information that you need and that we continue to keep you informed well in advance of a project coming to you for a vote, well in advance of you seeing that guaranteed maximum price contract. So those are some of the things we're continuing to work on. The contracts, Danny talked about the contracts being updated. We went through a very thorough process to update all of our contracts. We're also currently working on what our forms look like so that when a CM submits items to us for reimbursements, we can compare those forms and they look similar, and we can effectively say whether or not that's an item that needs to be reimbursed and was part of the project, and it's just a more efficient way for us to do things. Rod talked about project management software. That's something we've talked about a lot, and they've done some evaluations of what's out there because, again, we're always looking at ways to become more efficient in what we're doing and more accountable to the public and more transparent. So I hope you'll see that in a lot of the work that we're doing. Thank you.
All right, next phase was questions.
Thank you.
Questions. Very detailed, and thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank each of you for presenting. It really puts it in one concise document, the process with that. First, questions or input from board members?
Well, just prior to a first question, Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank the superintendent and staff for pulling together this information and providing us with this additional opportunity to hear of these changes. And I recognize that a lot of work had to go into this, and we certainly do applaud those individuals out there who have some 35 years of construction and accounting experience under their belts. And that's a good thing, because by now, I suspect you certainly do know what you're doing. And certainly we could not do what we do if you were not there for us. There are just a couple of things that I think I want to ask, and I suspect that I will be asking them at the elementary level, so bear with me, okay? I don't know who talked about well, first, accountability and transparency is important, and that's why we're here, of course. And we'll continue to be that. The manager at risk, I wanted to know what that was and what that really meant. A little bit more information about that. I wanted to make certain that I understand, again, that the recommendations from the Auditor General's office, that we're in compliance, are starting to make sure that's happening. And of course, I agree that the more public input we can get in our system, the better off we are as a system. And so I welcome that. I guess for me right now, that is a kind of good jumping off point to help me sort of crystallize some other thoughts I might be having, please.
Yes, ma'am. The construction manager at risk, once that construction manager is identified and we work on the guaranteed maximum price, that's the price that they're going to complete the project for. So the at-risk part means that they accept the risk of that project costing more than that guaranteed maximum price. So in simple terms, that's kind of it. If you want more detail, Danny can probably give you a little bit more.
Okay.
I'd like a little more detail on that, because that's a question we've been asked a lot, and
I'm
Danny,
getting there.
and I see Corey's here, one of our CMs is here back, but the at-risk for the CM, Danny, if you'd kind of explain, what do they have at risk on this? You know, what is their responsibility? You know, how many, the bidding process for them? But I think that's some real important information, and if we could, if that's okay, Ms.
Yes,
Lloyd.
of course, that was my next follow-up.
Okay. Your construction manager at risk is the CM, and he is responsible for, he is a partner, basically, is when we have a construction manager, the school board, the architect, and the construction manager at risk become partners. The construction manager at risk is required to take care of the bid process. He's required to follow all the state statutes. He's required to follow your policies, your procedures. He is required to do all the advertisement for it, and he takes on the risk from the point of making sure the project is done on time and within budget. With our school system trying to get students in August of every year, it is his responsibility to assure this district that those kids walk in that August 1st, or the day school starts, that the teachers are there a week before, and that the students, he assumes all that risk. If he has rainy days, he makes them up. Weekend work, he makes them up. If he goes over budget, he went over budget, not the school board. He assumes that risk.
All right, and each construction site would have a risk manager, or is there one risk manager for our entire district?
Each construction manager has a project manager and a superintendent on the project.
Each site, that's right.
Each site has it, and they are responsible for the entire project.
All right, that's what I thought. And then my next follow-up question, and I'm sure this will have one. This improved way of work that we are operating under now started 3 weeks ago. Started
Probably about 18 months ago,
That's
looking
good.
at policies and procedures.
All right.
It's an ongoing process. I can't
right.
tell you when we'll be done.
Okay.
But it started by looking at our policies and procedures and knowing that we needed to update some things.
Okay.
By our contract administrator and Danny looking at the contracts and wanting to refine those contracts so that they were a little bit more clear and all the agreements that we did. So that was a big piece of it. Looking at the Auditor General report and what we needed to do to be in compliance with their findings. It's been a long process. I expect it to keep going, and I'm happy to say that I work with a great team, so they want it to keep going. They're always coming up with ways to improve and things we can do.
All right. I'll withhold other questions for now.
Mr. Rasmussen?
So just to clarify, the decision to use a CM is something that's utilized by 50 some odd other districts, right? I'm assuming that part of the rationale for that is that we, unlike a business entity that might be building a new shopping mall or something, that our time is compressed, generally reserved to spring break, summer, right? We don't want construction happening on a school campus while our children are present and they need to be able to concentrate and focus, right? So that's one issue that's a little different for a school district versus some other entity, perhaps. Is it true, is my understanding, that before we began to utilize the construction manager concept, that this school district was in litigation with a general contractor who had been a straight-up hard bid, and that we were found, I mean, isn't there a cost-benefit analysis that went into this decision to choose to go to a CM strategy?
I think there's really a lot of reasons that you go with a construction manager at risk. One of them, Danny mentioned already, and that is that you have a partnership with the construction manager, and you have more of a relationship moving forward with the architect and that construction manager, and what you define in your programming and what you look at for building that. You also use a construction manager at risk because a lot of the work required to do that, bidding all these components of it to the subcontractors, we don't have the resources to do. So they are able to take that on. As a school district, we often have several small projects going on at one time. So for us to be able to do all the accounting on that and the project management on that, we couldn't do. So they take on that responsibility of bidding it out. So there's really a lot of advantages to it. And I think what you're talking about is when you go through a selection process, there's the opportunity for bid protests. And, I'm not sure how many of those in the past Leon County Schools has experienced, but certainly that's part of going through.
No, I wasn't talking about a bid protest. I was talking about a school under construction that was over, I think, way over budget, way over time, and we ended up having to pay the contractor a number of years ago, is my understanding, as I was trying to conduct some due diligence on how and why we got to this place.
Just on the, not the exact one, but having the history I've had with the district, my last years as I served as purchasing director, I can give you an example of one particularly. I won't name vendors or the process, but it dates back 1992. One of the last, I think probably the last bid protests that we had was involving a roofing project at one of our high schools, in which we had a number of bidders. We had an out-of-town vendor that was low by approximately $10,000. We had a local vendor that was second lowest bid. The low bidder, which was an out-of-town vendor, failed to meet all of the bid specifications in that they did not submit a sample of the roofing. And of course, that's the irregularity that could be waived. We chose not to waive that irregularity and go with the second low bidder, which was a local vendor. The low bidder took us to administrative hearing. We actually lost, in which the hearing officer ruled that we should have waived the irregularity. But the competence of staff that reviewed those bids had also checked on previous work, past history, other things. There was a gut feeling that, we may not get what we were bidding for in this. So, but we went with a low contract because we lost the hearing. Now, I don't have the exact figure, but I think over the history of that project then, we had about $180,000 worth of change orders to complete that project, because once you get into a roof and you get a roof off, you've got to go with it. So that was one of my last experiences that I had when I worked with the district on it. And then the construction manager process began about the early 90s, where we began to go that and comply with the provision. So, sorry for such a long history, but just I lived through that one.
And if I might, Mr. Chairman, that was my point. I think at some point prior to my being on this board, and maybe even everybody here, there was some due diligence that there was a cost-benefit analysis. There's a reason that CMs are authorized in statute, and at some point we made the decision that that would be in the best interest of this district and the taxpayers. But I'm not suggesting that this now isn't an opportunity for us to go back and revisit that. I'm just saying I don't think it was a decision that was arrived at lightly or ill-motivated back whenever that actually occurred. Can I say one more thing?
Sure, yeah.
You know, sometimes when you hear things like you got an audit finding, it sounds a little different. I would just like to read this if I could. The district primarily awards construction contracts to design professionals and construction contractors, usually using the traditional design, bid, build methods, although it has occasionally used guaranteed maximum price, etc. District personnel indicated they didn't have an established written policy for evaluating the various construction methods, etc., but they have documented evaluations of the various approaches to determine for each major construction project or significant maintenance-related job which would be most cost-effective. Without board-approved policies and procedures and documented evaluations, there's an increased risk that the district may not use the most cost-effective and beneficial construction method or maintenance technique. That doesn't mean that we didn't. Now, I guess my question, though, is why has it taken so long for this new policy to come to fruition? And I'm wondering if, in the process of creating some of these new policies, just like we have a school advisory council comprised of parents representing schools, might it make sense, Mr. Superintendent, to include some construction experts to help us think about the best way to design? Not maybe from out of town, maybe, that don't have a dog in the race, so to speak, here. Perhaps, we could take advantage of the professionals that we have at FSU and or in the state government regulatory side. That's just basically what I wanted to ask.
Response or anything to?
Sure, I think any way we can improve our process, I think that's what we're doing, right now. That one of the things that's been very valuable has been the CERT process, because the CERT committee has been a very powerful group of individuals that have, been involved in business. They probably don't have the construction expertise that you might be looking for, but anything like that makes our process better and more transparent, I would certainly entertain.
Well, I'm just thinking specifically about the what policy recommendation, the changes, if we're going to be responsive to this report and we have new policies, that
to review it.
Yeah, I mean, no offense to the DAC, but their expertise is, their perspective is their parents, and they're more focused on the educational responsibilities that we have. Might it be appropriate when and if new policies are developed in the area of construction that we put together an advisory council that would be unique to that particular area of expertise?
And one of the things that Dr. Wills has done, I wanted to mention this, is also check with other districts, to do comparisons with other school districts that have not, that have the same type of construction CM process or other processes, kind of get a comparison with them and have them look at it also and give us some advice too. And I know some of that's going on too, along with what Ms. Rasmussen said.
And just as you were speaking, I ran through my mind that one of the new committees we have is our Business Advisory Committee, and it could be a branch off of that group, since all our contractors are business folks here, so it may be something to look at. And of course, in the when we got the audit criticism 2012, we were in the review of all our school board budgets, policies,
right.
so it went through there. So and so we're probably on time in making some of those changes. You have to, because a lot of things are in midstream when you get an audit criticism. You just can't back up and go back to the landing. Right. You got to finish.
Right.
But probably some good thought for this next year.
Just let me be really clear, though, about this advisory group. I don't want anybody to think I'm suggesting that we should let the fox guard the hen house. I think these folks should be not look, people that are
Good point.
external to folks who might be doing construction projects here. We could either pulling them from out of town, or again, as I said, DBPR, or DMS, or expertise from FSU, or TCC, other entities in this community that have similar processes, albeit they may not be limited to summer construction.
Ms. Lewis Butler.
Yes, yeah, I want to ask about the one about the construction management, construction manager at risk. How is that person selected?
I think during his presentation, Danny, do you want to speak to that? He had the criteria listed.
Oh, that's the criteria?
The criteria is under Florida Statute 287.055. It is a statute that tells us how we must select construction managers. The 1013.45 gives us construction techniques, and construction managers are one of them, and it refers us back to the selection procedure in 287.055.
Okay, is that selected through the committee? I noticed on 255.103, you have the continuing contracts. So so we have a committee.
Yes, ma'am.
So the committee, I hear my colleagues talk about we need expertise on the committee. What on the committee, we can have if we have the committee and the expertise on the committee, can they be used to be the overseers of what we are selecting and ranking, the performance, the time? Because I remember 13 years ago when I was on the board, and I'm still on the board, I remember that we completed an elementary school, and they stated that it was completed on time and under budget. And that's the kind of information we like to hear. So what I'm saying is we have a committee, an established committee. Who appoints the people on the committee? Do we look at their background, occupation, to make sure that this is, or we just get a person that's on a committee that knows nothing about construction? And so that's what we need to look at, take a closer look at who we appoint to put on the committees. And then once we establish that, the construction manager is who they're selected by, who they're appointed by the committee or the superintendent of this board. That should have some input on the construction manager at risk.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Mr. Superintendent.
One question, Danny, I've heard, and I just want to think it's an important point, is I looked at our list, and we've got close to 20 people that are pre-qualified to be CMs, okay? A lot of districts, like we had somebody come in from another county, and they said they had 5 on their list. And I think Florida State uses 6, and now somebody might have told me they're expanding to 8. So you could have a list of 4 people on there. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
And the committee would rank those 4 people as maybe doing outstanding work, they're pre-qualified, and then those 4 people would have all the minor projects.
Yes, sir. They could.
And at the one county we talked to, they had 5. And each year, every 3 years, or they go back through the process, they rank them again, they just keep those 5 people on there. And we have almost 20.
Right.
Okay? And I just wanted to make that point, because I think that's a very, very important point, that we've got, almost 20 people on there that we feel like, I guess it's determined by the committee or whoever, that they're pre-qualified, they can do quality work. But a lot of entities use a CM process, and they might have 6 individuals that they've determined, and I'm sure they do great work, and those individuals do all the work. And that's perfectly, I guess, legit and legal because they're ranked, and that's how they do it. But this school board,
Right.
you've got almost 20 on the list that are doing these type of projects. And I think I was told the last bid protest we had was in 1991. Does that ring a bell with anybody?
91, 92.
91. So if something was being done in a process and somebody didn't like it, they could protest it, right?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
And the protest falls, and you have rules and regulations that you would go into. I just wanted to make that point because I think it's an important point that we've got almost 20 individuals that are out there that are trying to do, work that you've determined they're pre-qualified and they're acceptable to do this.
Right, that's good.
Right.
Would I be
Floyd.
correct, thank you, Mr. Chair, in that 20-member committee made up of these wonderful folk from the community and staff, they rotate off on an occasional basis?
Capital Outlay Committee.
Capital Outlay Committee, yeah, I think that's the case. Is that not true? I believe so, and one of us as a board member, I suspect, serves on that committee as well. Am I talking about
Yeah, I'm on the right,
committee?
yes, I'm the person on that
Okay,
committee.
but to show that we are part of
Capital Outlay.
this whole process, and, okay, I just wanted to make certain that we were
Yeah.
talking about the same. Sometimes down here, it sounds a little different.
And maybe I got us off target because I just, it was an important point that I just wanted to make sure
Okay.
that,
Okay,
we
we got it.
presented.
That was a good one.
Yeah, one of the things on our Capital Outlay Committee, it has a variety of folks that serve on that committee, and one of we have a lot of times some retired principals that come back that understand the process and on that, and the committee's been very functional over the years. I've been familiar with the Capital Outlay Committee with the experience that's there, and if you ever sat through one of them, there's some pretty darn tough questions that are asked by the committee members that are there.
Yes.
Staff sometimes get drip dried, because I've been sitting there and got drip dried before a little bit with some of the members on the process of what we're doing. So it's been a long, outstanding committee that we haven't had a lot of problem finding people to serve on that. We've had a lot of folks in the community that wanted to serve on that.
That's right.
On the committee. And of course, their communication with us comes on an annual basis, as mentioned. We also do the 5-year plan, and then we have the multi-year plan even, beyond that. And, of course, a lot of the work has been done on our bond issues and our half-penny sales tax since the mid-'80s. There's a poster in front of every school that lays out the projects on that. Sometimes I get the question, when are you going to get to it? Well, I can always go to the capital outlay plan and say that's in the 6th year or the 10th year, because most of us that have kids in school or grandkids in school, I must say, we want everything done right now, but we have to phase these projects in over time. So that little poster, and whoever came up with that idea that we put in front of every school where the money was going, was a great idea, because at the end of the bond issue, the first half-penny sales tax, we could state we did everything on the project was here, or if there was something that carried forward, because a lot of times when you get into a project, you'll discover some additional needs or things will change on that. Mr. Rasmussen.
A quick clarifying question that you prompted me to think about. If in the event that we have a selection process for the construction manager, just to underscore the fact that the construction manager then bids by competitive bid process all of the subcontractors.
Yes.
Is that subject to the same bid protest laws and processes that we would be subject to if we did a straight-up competitive bid?
Yes.
Okay, so even under the selected construction managers, we haven't had any bid protests from the subcontractors in all this time?
Oh,
It's good news.
and I
How
have,
many bids do they have to submit each area? There's 25 areas, 22 areas? How many?
3, I think.
We're pushing for a minimum of 3 bids in every division. We look at that also as part of the ranking. When a CM has low participation, his next project, he scored by what his performance. We expect them to get, like I said, a minimum of 3 bids on every division. Sometimes they come in as many as 7 and 8 bids in one division, like HVAC or electrical.
Mr. Rasmussen, then Ms. Boyd.
You made me think of another question. So when we are doing either a selection process or a bid, all bids don't have to be strictly based on price, is that correct? You're allowed to incorporate in your evaluation, as long as this is stipulated up front, that past work history might be like you just mentioned, where you look back and we look and see if they delivered on what they said they were going to do or whatever. Is that correct?
With the selection process, the CM pre-qualifies the the bidders. If a CM has had a bidder that has not performed, they will not qualify them.
Okay.
The CM is responsible. Now, if we bid it, we're locked in at low bid if we bid a project. That's why we use the CM process.
So if someone comes in a low bid environment during a recession from Atlanta or somewhere with a really low bid, because they're just trying to get business, and we wouldn't be able to give preference to any of our local contractors, or we would have to go with the low bid. Even if we knew their work had not been well received in Atlanta and
Up to par.
that they may not be able to deliver at the standard in which we were hoping.
The contract manager would have to pre-qualify them.
No, in a straight-up bid.
Oh, in a straight-up bid, we would either have to have documentation to disqualify them, or we would have to take their bid.
And even if they submit, if we were to disqualify one because of information we knew or quality of work or something like that, they would, under a straight-up bid, they would still have the option under the bid protest laws to file a protest for us, and it would go before here, and we'd have to prove that, or unless we chose not to waive the irregularity in that. And but over the history, most of those protests get filed. Most all of them have been resolved locally once we sit down with the vendor, or with it, they get solved locally without having to go to an administrative hearing. Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, sir. This discussion brings to my mind a point that Mr. Albritton mentioned, minority vendors. I'm wondering how and to what extent the role and the reach of our policy is as it relates to minority vendors, those companies whose minority vendors are there or not there. How do we ascertain that we're using companies who fit into what our philosophy is about inclusiveness?
We have 3 women-owned minority businesses, or CMs, that are on that list of 20. There are 3 firms that qualify. We also require them to follow y'all's policy and the documentation with the small business department to prove and to try to incorporate as many small businesses as they can by the policy that's established by the school board.
Ms. Rasmussen.
Sorry, were you finished?
No, go ahead.
No.
I'm trying to think of a way to ask the next question. Go ahead and I'll think of how
Okay.
to relate it to this.
Do other entities in our community, the city, the county, FSU, TCC, the hospital, do they use a process like this, or do anything that gives preference to local contractors?
Do we know?
In the selection process in 287.055, location is one of the criteria.
And so is the CMBE too. That's
So-
one of the criteria as well.
So-
Local preference.
So we're allowed to weight that, and that's an understanding that everybody knows, that if you're from another state or something. I wanted to just, for what it's worth, in the field in which I work and where I'm employed in my career, I work with higher ed, and we talk a lot about eds and meds. Eds and meds are anchor institutions in communities, and they have a responsibility to their local community, and most of our colleges and universities take that very seriously. And it's for things like where they invest their money, where they, because they're an anchor institution in that community. And I have to think that as many people as we employ, the contractors that are here in this community are our parents, they're our taxpayers, they are, now I'm not saying pick one over another, I'm just saying in terms of local people that are here in this community. And I just wondered, I've never been involved in any of the selection processes at all ever here, so
That, you'll be on that committee.
but,
Cap outlay.
you know, I was just, I either just wanted to make that point or ask if that is something that's widely held among other school districts or in our county.
And may I now try and ask my follow-up question to the question?
First, Ms.,
Oh, I'm sorry.
do you want to answer or comment to that, Ms. Rasmussen?
Not necessarily.
Okay. All right, Ms. Boyd.
Okay. You mentioned that there were 3 minority firms that qualify. And I guess my larger question was, well, thank you for that, but in the larger firms, when they come to work for us, is there anyone checking to see if those folk who work for them in any way are or minorities in any regard? I'm looking for that kind of diversity. That's the word I'm looking for. Who checks that?
In our contract, they're required to follow your policies under small business development guidelines.
Okay.
Each contractor is required to contact the small business department. There's a form on his website that they fill out showing the participation in each project.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
I was
I'm
going to
done.
add to
Ms.
that.
Willis Butler.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, don't we have a person in charge of minority contract for the district? Small business.
Dexter Martin, you see.
And Dexter Martin's here
Mr.
with us
Martin,
tonight.
right. So, okay, so Mr. Martin would be the person that would make sure that we're following the policy on diversity
Yes, ma'am.
when it comes to genders and contractors and small business. So he monitors that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
All right. What else? Just one area that went over a little quickly, but it was a great point, that I've had some questions asked before, particularly when over the years we have an area where schools are overcrowded, and there's an expectancy, can't you just go ahead and add another wing? And it's not that simple. And it was a point, particularly with our one and a half mil money that we received on that. And I've tried to explain it this way a little bit, so if I'm incorrect, let me know. In the way I've tried to explain, we just can't come next week and build another wing at that school. And that's because of some of the DOE requirements on called student stations, in that they measure us by our total elementary, middle school, and high school student stations on a county-wide basis. They don't care how many you got at any one school, but that's your cap. And so if we have a shifting population, this usually occurs over time, and they move to another school, let's say like Roberts and Mumford, those schools grew rapidly, with that. And then we have even some of our older schools that populations tend, and they'll start a growth increase, so we've seen that. But then we have schools that go down. Isn't that part of the reason we have some of our schools that we designate as countywide magnets, countywide programs? Because if we had a school that, say, occupies 800 student stations, but our population's down to 300, I'm just going to throw that out. If we do a countywide magnet program there and open up district-wide for 300 magnet students to come there, that actually frees up 500 student stations then that could be assigned where the need is. I know that was sort of simplified, but I want to am I correct?
Yes, sir, I think you explained it perfectly. The purpose of creating a magnet is to attract students to a school that has low enrollment. So it allows you to focus on the program and activities that you can offer students that will attract them to that school. Because ideally what we want is to have a balance in student enrollment at all of our sites. So I think you described it correctly.
Okay, that's been some time when I met with parent groups, or they can't understand that we just can't go ahead and build another wing right now because the kids are here. Why don't you build?
That's right. They
And
look
it
at
depends on the fund source. Now,
Yeah.
with that, the DOE approval on that process with submitting, give me just a little idea of how much time it takes once we get certain phase drawings in the DOE and review. That's just not next week, is it? Now, what is when we have to get DOE's approval on some of our projects, how long does that take? I know there might not be one answer to that, but it's...
Once the board approves the drawings, approves the plans to go to DOE, they're given 30 days to do the actual review.
Okay.
What we try to do is simultaneously advertise for bid as well as
Okay.
have our own in-house review. Once that review is completed and the comments are provided by DOE, anywhere between 30 to 45 days, we typically go to what they call a notice to proceed. Construction may start anywhere from 15 to 30 days thereafter, so approximately 60 days, I'm sorry.
And we've had good cooperation with DOE.
Yes.
Pretty well, that process has moved pretty smoothly as we've
Yes.
been adding with that.
What we always try to do to try to shorten that time frame up is try to meet earlier with some of the earlier phases such that the full 30-day time allotment that they give us for reviews is not all taken up completely.
Okay, good. Ms. Lewis Butler.
Yes,
Let me, if we may add one piece to that.
Sure.
What Rod's talking about is once you're in design and you have the drawings and you submit those to DOE to their approval. Prior to that, and related to what you were just talking about, is what Martha was talking about with the FTE approval.
Yes, prior to that, we submit a document, which is the 5-year educational plant survey, and that takes quite a bit of time because you have to meet with all the principals, you have to meet with all the district staff to make sure you're getting everything covered for all of our sites. And we submit it for a complimentary review to DOE to make sure that we've got everything where we need it to be. And then it comes to the board for public hearing and approval. So it has to go through several board meetings before it actually gets to DOE for actual approval as well.
So that's, for example, if you want to build the new wing at Roberts, the process that it has to go through approval with DOE is multiple layers.
With that, okay.
And we do the 5-year survey every 5 years, but we can do supplemental spot surveys, which we have done in the past. If a need comes up, we can take it back through the same process for those specific sites that need to be reviewed, and then that's brought back to the board for approval as well.
Good.
yes, I want
Ms.
to
Lewis
talk.
Butler.
Yeah, I was approached by a parent today about elementary school, and I told, we do prioritize our needs, don't we? And we get input from our principals as well. I know each school has its own SAC committee, and they can report. There was saying something about covers needed at the walkways. Students are walking in the rain to the portables. Covers needed in the PE area. Students walking, And so we want to make sure. Do we have a committee that go and talk with the principals to make very sure that these needs are met?
One thing that I skipped over really quickly, I think, during the capital outlay discussion was we have a priority list that is a board-approved list, and that is in your packet. The priority of the capital outlay committee is safety and health. We want to make sure that we have safe schools, we have all of those issues are taken care of, and the capital outlay committee goes through that list when they're deciding the budget.
Right.
I also meet with the principals during this meeting process, along with project coordinators usually, and we discuss what the principal sees as needs, and I explain to them like where it is on the priority list of what they're asking for. One of the things that we've had asked about a lot is covered walkways to portables.
Right.
And if we put a covered walkway to a portable, then that portable is considered permanent space.
Okay.
And it restricts us from adding a permanent building later in the future. It just
Okay.
restricts that a little more. And
Good
I've explained that to a lot of
communication.
principals.
All right, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Just brief, I just have one little brief comment, and then we, because I have also been asked the question of me, why do you just rubber stamp consent agenda? I hope that the process that's been described here tonight, everyone realizes that each of us as board members, we're not seeing these things for the first time.
Right.
It starts from that conception, from our capital outlay plan, our funding, our budget. So it's a continuous process for us, so that when we get a superintendent's recommendation for the final step, awarding of a contract, that history there is available for all of us as to how we got there, the process, and with that. There's a little more formal process that we can take, and I do as a board member. We have an agenda that comes to each of us, and like next Tuesday night's our board meeting. Sometime Wednesday, I'll start looking for my agenda. It usually comes a week ahead of time. and we'll see which ones are coming. Sometimes I forget when they're actually going to come to the board for approval. But once we see a list of construction contracts or other items that are coming to the board, I get a chance to see those. There's a cover sheet that comes with that explains the fiscal impact, who's submitting the item description, and full superintendent's recommendation. Then a key for me on that, right below that, I get to see the entire history of everyone in staff. Many of you sitting here, our attorney, others that have reviewed that before it ever comes to the board. Then as a board member, I get a chance to review every word and every detail of the final contract. So if there's anything in there from the budget to the terms to the condition, I have from usually Wednesday up until right before the board meeting. If I have a question or concern, I do submit that to the superintendent and appropriate staff, regarding any of those items. And those that watch our board agenda scheduling realize that we reserve every Monday before every board meeting for a pre-agenda workshop. And over the years, that has been used in case multiple board members have questions and the superintendent decides he needs to exercise that for us so that staff can come in and bring us all up to speed on that. So we have that opportunity. But before we move the consent agenda, I can speak myself and I think on behalf of the board, we've had the opportunity, we know what's behind it. We may be seeing the final wording of that final contract, before, and then historically, right after the board meeting, the chairman sits here and signs all that. But there are no surprises that come, to us on that. If it's surprises, maybe because you hadn't done enough homework, but then that's our fault if I hadn't done enough homework, to know of a project on that. So that's been, one of the questions that, particularly that's been asking me, what do you do for us, with a project? So, Ms. Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask, and I did this at the last board meeting, to your point, and I don't want to make our board meetings any longer or more onerous on the staff, but I do think in the interest of transparency in the current environment, just until people get more comfortable, if we could come up with a process through which all of the construction contracts, maybe Dr. Wills or you guys, whoever gets the pleasure of coming to our meetings, could stand up and articulate each project, what it's for, how it was, and then maybe a cover sheet that is a checklist that speaks to all of the concerns that have been raised, and that way we can at least be more transparent. It would be, I don't know that we need to go into great depth on each one, but just a brief description of what it is and how many steps it's been through and that kind of thing, I would appreciate.
And I would agree with that. It's a pleasure of the board, to have that, so. And of course, in our changes and additions to the agenda, each of us can request the superintendent to move a project during that, and he's been very good about moving it. Plus, we can do it even that board meeting night too. But the practice of what you're saying of doing that for these projects, I would have no problem with.
So may I make that an official request so that I don't have to call every week and ask for items to be moved? Just, even if it's just for a temporary period of time until everybody's a lot more comfortable with exactly what all is going on and what the criteria are and that they've all been met. Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Mr. Superintendent.
I think we're going to move them all to consideration is the plan now, so that'll give us a chance to come in on consideration and talk to each item, and that way any questions or whatever could have. But I did want to make the point that Mr. Van Camp did earlier, that I think that our board members have been doing due diligence regardless whether it's in consideration or on consent. I know how y'all look at these and how you do it, but I think Ms. Rasmussen's comment is right on target for transparency. Let's put them all on consideration, then we can talk to each issue that we have that comes up.
Good. Any more questions, comment for public input?
Yeah, yes, sir. And to add to
Ms.
that,
Lewis-Butler.
Mr. Chairman and Board, the Capital Outlay Committee, I served on there now presently, and we can, once when we have our Capital Outlay Committee meetings, and we have our school board meetings, we can follow up with a report at each school board meeting about where we are, the status of the Capital Outlay Committee and what we're doing as a way of work.
Okay. All right. All right. We have two speakers tonight that have asked to give us some public comment, and And as I call your name, if you come up, we'll have 3 minutes. If you would, make your comments, within those 3 minutes. Be concise. Don't just repeat the same thing over and over. But you will have 3 minutes, and tonight there will be a chance for you to share with the board. There will be no action taken tonight, so we welcome any public comment regarding our workshop tonight or the construction process. And if I get Mr. Mark Tall, is that correct? Tall?
I'm not going to speak right today, but I'll talk to some of you privately.
All right, thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Richard Watson. And if you give us your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Richard Watson. I'm Legislative Counsel for Associated Builders and Contractors. I'm here in Tallahassee, 388 South Franklin Boulevard. ABC is the trade association for commercial construction. We have 5 chapters in the state with 2,000 corporate employers, hiring 100,000 people in the construction industry in Florida. Ms. Bowen, to your point, 40% of our employees are minorities, which we're very proud of. Our members do most of the public construction in the state, not only schools, but state colleges and universities, hospitals, prisons, anything that's commercial construction, not residential, our members do. I was involved a little over 20 years ago when we first, by statute, passed the construction management. Before that, everything in public construction was lowest responsible bidder or hard bid, and there were problems with that system. The process took longer. The fixed price made change orders more numerous. There was a lot of litigation on it. The process was more rigid. And so Florida was at the forefront when we started construction management of all the states. And the reasons were that it was more a collaborative process with more flexibility. The process was shorter. First it was construction management only, but it evolved into construction management at risk, which puts the risk of any overages on the construction manager. And it wasn't mentioned in the presentation, but if a job comes in for less than the fixed price, those funds are returned to the owner or the school board. Construction management is used in more complicated projects, and oftentimes the school boards have more complicated processes because they have students in school. You can only work in the summer or in the holidays, and it's more complicated and more sophisticated when you have to expand to a present location rather than building from scratch. The staff did a great job about laying out the process that you have. The fact that 52 of the 67 school boards utilize CM, I think, speaks to the value of that program. At first, there was resistance 20 years ago. People were used to the hard bid or the lowest responsible bidder, but the majority of contracts for public construction in Florida are now construction management.
Right. Mr. Superintendent.
A couple of questions, if we could. One of the issues that I've heard on CM, and you can't really bid the CM, can you? I mean, what we do is we negotiate a fee, for the CM that comes in. Is that pretty standard from what you see around?
Yes, it's usually a percentage. I think for Leon County it's 8%, I think. That's pretty standard. And
everything else beyond that's done, the work that's done is bid out with
Exactly.
3 bids, and we have somebody present when they open those bids. Is that pretty standard, what you see?
Yes, yes, that's standard.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
With that.
Thank you.
All right, we're moved for some closing comments now from Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Crumpler.
Can I make
Yeah.
a couple
Yes.
comments? I wasn't going to say anything tonight because I, unlike, thank you, Ms. Rasmussen, I, unlike some in the community, am choosing to wait. I think we've done now 3 or 4 investigations. We're waiting on a 5th. I could have that number wrong, so bear with me on that. First of all, I want to thank the staff that's here. You've taken a beating publicly by a couple of people that have a political agenda, and I'm just going to talk about the elephant in the room. I'm just that kind of guy. I'm not going to stand behind and pretend there's not an elephant in the room. I'm sure my attorney is quaking in his boots, but I am going to be judicious in what I say tonight. But I want everybody that works for the Leon County School System to know that I take full responsibility for this. You followed the policies. I concur with the superintendent. We did what we did with the construction management process because it works. There's 2 things that the superintendent and I have talked about over the years that I never wanted to do. Miss a payroll. Superintendent, I think we had to go one night at midnight and borrow a couple of $1 million from Capital City Bank to make payroll because something happened with the State Board of Administration. The other thing was that I didn't want to open a school like happened in this district in the mid-'90s. Everybody seems to have memory lapse. This board member doesn't. Didn't want to have kids in portables, wanted a cafeteria, wanted our schools to be working, okay? Find me guilty as charged that maybe I didn't see that there were 2 projects split that were $1,999.99. Guilty of not seeing that. We're moving a lot of projects. This process is, I don't know, 30 or 40, 50, 60 steps in this. For anyone to suggest that, again, has a political motivation to attack our superintendent, award-winning superintendent, and ladies and gentlemen, he can tell you, he and I don't always get along. We have some knockdown dragouts. We've chosen as a board to conduct ourselves in a manner that we try not to publicly get up here and fight with each other. That should not be misconstrued that this board does not disagree. So that's one point that I wanted to make. The construction management process works. To suggest that there would have to be a conspiracy, I'm just, I'm so proud of you guys. You debunked this little report in so many ways. Certainly there's some other components that I'm going to wait on before I make final judgment. But you've confused so many, not so many, a few people. I think most people see where this is at and where this is coming from. You have confused them with the facts tonight. And I want to thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
So, the other thing that I want to talk about real briefly is, and Superintendent, I apologize for stepping in before your time. I think back to my first meeting on this school board. Anybody have any idea where it was? It was held in the basement of an attorney's office downtown. There was not one room for one citizen to sit at and or participate in that meeting.
Right.
And that Tuesday night, I made a motion to move that out of that basement into a handicap-accessible, publicly lit and paid-for building where we could discuss those agenda reviews. Again, people have some memory lapses here. That same meeting, there was an editorial in the paper, and this isn't about Dee, but I just want to talk a little bit about, there's been a lot of memory loss here. The first meeting, the Tallahassee Democrat wrote an editorial about how refreshing it was to have a board member that was questioning sole source bidding. Never forget it. At that time, I was a young kid, 39 years old, and felt like I had to make some points. I think I've developed some credibility, and when I say something, I don't have to get up and beat my chest like I did 12 years ago, as all of you can attest to, especially Miss Lewis, Butler, and Miss Bowen, who have been with me the longest. I want to talk about the process. To suggest that this is not transparent, and that we have not, and that I have not begged, that this board has not begged, that this superintendent and staff have not begged for citizen participation is poppycock. Plain and simple. We have put ads in the paper. We do an agenda review. We have board docs. When I got on the board, folks, you couldn't, who remembers Mr. Danaher? Remember, you couldn't even get copies of paper agendas. We had to start putting paper. And this is not about me. This goes back to a lot of other people that were on the board, the Fred Varnes, the Sheila Costigan, the Bill Munfords that were here before. And we've had a transition. We've moved over the years. We have said as a board this is priority. We want community input, we want public input, and we have done everything but stand on our heads, and we have at times stood on our heads and beat the drum to get community support. And I'm going to talk about that just for a minute. We didn't televise meetings before. When I got on the board, we started talking about that. We said, look, we got to start televising these boards. We need people to get out here. I've been quoted in the paper. You know, when we would have only Mr. Danaher, God rest his soul, who would come out, one man in a community as large as ours would come out and discuss our $500+ million budget. We've asked and begged this community to come out and to suggest again, I'm going to say this a couple times, that we aren't being transparent is disingenuous. And the facts are being debunked here tonight as it relates to that process. Community conversations that the superintendent started, that was his idea. Community board meetings, this board said, hey, let's try to get out into the community. Let's have board meetings. Let's talk about what it is that we're doing. We really want parents to get involved because we know to be a successful district, we have to have parents involved. It can't just be our 5,000 employees, and it certainly can't be those of us up here. I'm trying to wind down here, bring it in for a landing. Bear with me. The District Advisory Council, we all appoint people to represent us. Those are parents. The three specific groups that we have that review our construction projects that are comprised of the people that some of us have discussed tonight about adding and getting them to review. Folks, they're already reviewing this, and I will support any motion that will bring even more people in to review that. But to suggest otherwise is just not correct. We've got three separate groups just that review capital outlay. We've got a board member on there. And to suggest that the superintendent is responsible for making all of these decisions is, again, less than genuine. The CERT committee, which is made up of 70 or so business leaders from our community. We have bulletin boards. I don't know what we call them. They're not bulletin boards. That's going back. That's a school. We've got signs in front of every one of our schools that said, "Here's the money. Here's where it's going." As I recall, and somebody stand up and correct me if I'm wrong, every project that we said we did with that half-penny sales tax, we did on time and under budget. Right. Danny, right. Dr. Wills, if I'm wrong, you call me out.
You're right.
Tell me I'm lying.
Sure.
Thank you. It's reviewed by DOE. The construction management process, as you heard from the gentleman, and I apologize, I don't know him. I didn't ask him to be here tonight, but
Watson.
Thank you, sir. Talks about that, how many other districts use that. There's a reason that we use it because, again, we've got to move fast. We've got to be swift. If we were not moving fast and swift, ladies and gentlemen, this room would be packed 100-fold of what it is tonight.
Yes.
And I don't want to be there. I want to fix the process. Now, let's go back to something else that's been discussed, but everybody's kicked around and nobody's talked about it. This report came out mid-December. Dr. Wills, how many policies have we changed? I think we've changed 8 construction policies. So to suggest that because we get this report and now we're trying to scamper and fix all of these things is, again, less than genuine. If I'm wrong, say I'm wrong. Am I wrong? Okay, thank you. How many policies have we changed in the last, let's just pick a date.
18 months.
18 months to 20, let's just say 24 months. How many policies do you think that we've changed?
Construction related?
No, complete policy review.
We probably bring you about 5 or 6 a month.
Okay. So again, to suggest that we're just doing this and scrambling the jets, is, again, you've heard my story, disingenuous. This is so wrought with political revenge that it's like making sausage. I told my daughters this weekend, I said, you know, the political sausage that's being made, I wouldn't put in my house. And that comes from somebody, you know, for my close friends and family and people that I'm acquainted with know this. I have no intent of, and I never say never. I'm not running for the school board again. I never, ever intend to run for any political office. Didn't take political contributions from the vendors in my last election. Took $0. So I think that I have somewhat of an objective view. The superintendent and I aren't drinking buddies. We don't go to dinner. We're professional colleagues. And to see a man face what he's had to face is just uncalled for. And I, again, am being very judicious in my response to this tonight. But I would hope that this community would look at the man's record and just take pause. And I know there's a lot of little snirking and laughing, and you know, it's almost this country, I think. It's not this community. This country just wants to find someone evil. And to see the good things that this man has done, has he made mistakes? Probably. I know I've made a lot of them. I haven't seen anything that's been criminal. I haven't seen anything that's been unethical. I stand ready to see that in is it our 4th or 5th report that we've got? But I would ask this community to look at what this district has done and the good people that we have working here. To suggest that 5,000 employees, and certainly even in the construction management group, I'm just proud to be a little part about that much of it, ladies and gentlemen. So keep your heads up, as I've told the superintendent. You guys keep your heads up. You continue to do the good work of this community. And remember that we don't serve 1 or 2 or 3 people that have a political agenda. We serve about 34,000 kids.
Absolutely.
And don't forget that tomorrow morning when you come back into the office. My apologies, Mr. Superintendent, for taking your time. Appreciate it.
Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you. One thing I wanted to mention, thank the board again for the great questions tonight, but the construction staff, I just want to thank you, all of you that are here tonight, and I want to thank you for what you've done over the years. A lot of you have been involved in this department for a very long time. There's a lot of history here, and I just want to thank you for what all you've done and your contributions, and again, we appreciate it. This is a tough job that you have every day, and we appreciate what you do. And with that, thank you, board members.
I move we
Thank you,
rise.
Mr. Superintendent.
Okay, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.